Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my week number 13 waiver wire pickups for fantasy football in 2021. Inside today's video, we're going to be going over my top 10 waiver wire pickups of the week, as well as explaining in depth into why I believe you guys should be picking up these players off of the waiver wire right now. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask, if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure to hit that like button down below. It would help us out a ton. And if you would like to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 13 waiver wire ads. We begin with my number one waiver wire ad of the week, and that is Chuba Hubbard, running back of the Carolina Panthers, who is on bye this week. Christian McCaffrey was placed on the IR earlier on this morning, and he is now done for the season. So now it is Chuba Hubbard's time to shine. If you guys remember, earlier on in the season, Christian McCaffrey was banged up and missed multiple weeks, and in that time, Chuba Hubbard fit that offense like a glove. His last game of having that full workload before Christian McCaffrey returned was in week number 8 up against the Atlanta Falcons. In that game, he had 24 rushes for 82 yards as well as a rushing touchdown. He also had 1 reception on 2 targets for 9 yards. He also had a fumble in that game, which I figured I would include because it was on the stat sheet, but that's not something to really worry about. It's not like Chuba Hubbard has fumbleitis, so based upon what we saw earlier on in the season, to me, it should be crystal clear for you guys that you want to go ahead and get Chuba Hubbard right now. Now, I understand that he is not going to be available in 100% of leagues, but there are plenty of leagues where Chuba Hubbard is available, and if you have Christian McCaffrey, or even if you don't have Christian McCaffrey, you need to be scooping him up right now. I really do believe that Chuba Hubbard has top 5 potential game in and game out going forward. I understand that Cam Newton's played like absolute dog shit last week up against the Miami Dolphins, but I do think that he is going to be able to get things right going forward. Obviously, they have a bye this week, so they can reflect on that loss last week and look a lot better going forward. I do believe that Chuba Hubbard should be the number one waiver wire pickup of the week. Next up, we move to another running back based on a running back injury, and that is Alexander Mattison, running back of the Minnesota Vikings, who has an amazing matchup this week up against the Detroit Lions in Detroit. Dalvin Cook tore his labrum while dislocating his shoulder up against the San Francisco 49ers in their matchup on Sunday, and this is not a season-ending injury, which is great, but it seems like he is going to be out for at least the next couple of games. In 2019, Dalvin Cook actually suffered a very similar injury to this one and was out 2 games with that injury, so it is very likely that he will be back within the next 2 or 3 weeks of the season. Following Cook's injury up against the 49ers, Alexander Mattison had 7 rushes for 21 yards as well as a touchdown in that game. He also had 3 receptions on 2 targets for 7 yards. So this is a scenario that is so similar to Chuba Hubbard and Christian McCaffrey. When Christian McCaffrey is healthy, you see virtually 0 Chuba Hubbard on the field. When Dalvin Cook is healthy, you see virtually 0 Alexander Mattison, because in both scenarios, Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook are the clear workhorse running backs. They are barely leaving the field. But now with Dalvin Cook out, you just go ahead and throw Alexander Mattison into that role, and the man is going to flourish, especially this week up against a not-so-hot Detroit Lions defense. This is an absolute smash matchup. Speaking of the Detroit Lions, my next waiver wire ad on the week is Jamaal Williams, running back of the Detroit Lions, going up against the Minnesota Vikings. DeAndre Swift is considered day-to-day with a shoulder sprain that he suffered up against the Chicago Bears on Thanksgiving. It is entirely possible that I will note that DeAndre Swift could return this week, but it seems like he's going to miss at least a game or 2, and based upon what head coach of the team Dan Campbell said earlier today, it seems like this is going to be an uphill climb for DeAndre Swift to play this week, so I personally believe that he will be out for at least this game, and Jamaal Williams will be in the driver's seat at the running back position for the Lions up against the Vikings. Following DeAndre Swift's injury up against the Bears, we saw Jamaal Williams have 15 rushes for 65 yards, as well as having 5 receptions on 5 targets for 18 yards. Is Jamaal Williams DeAndre Swift? Of course not. They don't have the same burst. Like, DeAndre Swift's burst is very fast, but still, Jamaal Williams will be heavily involved in this offense. We all know that Jared Goff this season has been the fucking king. We got to get him a crown. The king of the dump off. He loves dumping the ball off to the running back position. I believe Jamaal Williams will see tons of dump offs going forward until DeAndre Swift returns. Jamaal Williams did also look very solid for the team earlier on in the season, especially in week number 1 up against the 49ers when he was actually utilized in the offense. So I think with him getting a much better role, he will be a solid option going forward until DeAndre Swift ends up returning. Next up, we have Dontrell Hilliard, running back of the Tennessee Titans. The Titans are also just so happen to be on bye this week. Dontrell Hilliard led the team in rushing up against the New England Patriots last week. This is still, though, I will go ahead and throw some caution tape over this. This is still very much a split share between Hilliard and Deonta Foreman, but still, even with that said, I do believe that Hilliard is worthy of an ad. Last week up against the Patriots, 12 rushes for 131 yards and a touchdown, which is very impressive up against the Patriots defense that has looked very good thus far this season, especially recently. The Patriots defense has really caught on. He also had 1 reception on 2 targets for 2 yards. He also had a fumble in that game, but just like with what we talked about earlier with Chuba Hubbard, kind of just push that one away. I don't really think about that too much. I think that Dontrell Hilliard is certainly worthy of a waiver wire ad, but is he a guy that I'm looking to play in every single matchup? No, I assess the backfield for another game before I just throw him in there. But hey, if you are in a bit of a pickle, I do think that going forward, obviously this week you can't play him because they have bye week, but next week after that, I think you can play Dontrell Hilliard, especially if you are in that pickle. But before we get on into the next waiver wire pickup, I would like to let you guys know that we have partnered with Yahoo Fantasy this NFL season to bring you guys some great offers. Check out our exclusive limited time offer, which gets you guys 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. To qualify, you need to be new to Yahoo, sign up for an account via the link down below, deposit, and play. That's it. Yahoo will send us your name after you play in your first paid contest, and we'll reach out to you via email with your coupon. If you would like immediate access, that's all right. All you got to do is email support@awesemo.com, and we'll get you set up immediately. You can also claim a free $10 of site credit by clicking the link in the video description below, which can be used to enter any Yahoo contest. Make sure you guys use our DFS tools and projections designed specifically for Yahoo to give you guys the best shot at winning big. Please make sure that you guys go ahead and check out Yahoo Fantasy, link down below in the description. My next waiver wire ad, now we're pivoting off the running backs. We're going to a wide receiver for a quick second here, and that is Kendrick Bourne, wide receiver of the New England Patriots, going up against the Buffalo Bills this week. The Bills defense did look very stout up against the Saints last week, after they got their shit handed to them by Jonathan Taylor and the Colts the week prior. So this matchup isn't amazing, but I do not hate it up against the Buffalo Bills. If you had to guess off the top of your head, I guarantee you would get this question wrong. What number wide receiver is Kendrick Bourne right now in half PPR leagues? The answer to that question, maybe you want to go ahead and type it in the comments. Maybe you do actually know. He is wide receiver number 21 in half PPR, and he is still available in tons of leagues. In week number 12, up against the Titans, he had 5 receptions on 6 targets for 61 yards and not 1, but 2 tutties in that game. He had 2 fucking touchdowns up against the Titans. While he doesn't have the same volume as a guy like Jacoby Myers has on the offense, it seems like if you have Jacoby Myers, you should take him off your team, throw him overboard, and pick up Kendrick Bourne, because even if the volume isn't necessarily always going to Kendrick Bourne inside of the red zone, it seems like it's going to Kendrick Bourne a lot, as he has been very valuable in terms of fantasy football. So the wide receiver number 21 in half PPR is available on your waiver wire. Pretty much a no-brainer to go ahead and pick him up. Now we pivot back in to the running back position for a quick second here with Matt Breida, running back of the Buffalo Bills, going up against the New England Patriots. Zach Moss was a healthy scratch last week. After being perceived as the leader of this backfield early on the season, the man gets healthy scratched, and Matt Breida looks much better than Singletary in their matchup up against the Saints last week. I honestly think that Matt Breida might be the best running back on this roster, and based upon how Matt Breida did last year, that should be shocking. That really should be shocking, because Zach Moss and Singletary aren't awful. But Matt Breida has really caught on as of recently, and I honestly think he might be the lead back for the rest of the season. Last week, up against the New Orleans Saints on Thanksgiving, we saw Matt Breida have 9 rushes for 26 yards, as well as having 2 receptions on 2 targets for a touchdown in that game. So again, is it a lock that Matt Breida is going to be the most valuable fantasy asset at the running back position of the Buffalo Bills? Of course not. Is it likely that Zach Moss is 100% going to be a healthy scratch next week? Of course not. But based upon what we've seen recently, I think that Matt Breida should definitely be rostered, and I think that you guys should be picking him up, especially if you need some running back help. Next up, we move back to the wide receiver position with Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, wide receiver of the Tennessee Titans. Just like with Hilliard, obviously, on the Titans, they're on bye this week. So A.J. Brown and Julio Jones are on the IR. So the ball's got to be fucking thrown somewhere. Where is that going to be? Seems like it's going to be to Mr. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, or Mr. NWI. Last week up against the Patriots, he had 2 receptions on 5 targets for 25 yards and a touchdown. To me, the explanation for Mr. Nick Westbrook is not very complicated. It's that he is the number 1 receiver on the team because A.J. Brown and Julio Jones are gone. When Julio and A.J. Brown return, then you can just cut them, right? You can just release them from your team. But right now, without them, the perfect position to shine, Ikhine is in, and I think he will be successful going forward until those 2 players return. Next up, we move to Kmet, tight end of the Chicago Bears, going up against the Arizona Cardinals this week. This week, as well, a double this week for you guys, Justin Fields' availability is up in the air. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? Now, he has cracked ribs, so my thought process, if I'm Matt Nagy, maybe if I'm Matt Nagy, I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm going to get fired, so let's throw Justin Fields out there, because that's your best shot at winning. But in reality, you should probably put, the guy you traded these picks for, your franchise quarterback, on ice with some cracked ribs. So I don't think he's going to play this week, but you never really know with the Bears. But I do believe that even if it's Fields or if it's Dalton, that doesn't really matter at all for Cole Kmet, as both of them seem to really like to heavily pepper Cole Kmet with targets. Last week, especially with Andy Dalton under center up against the Detroit Lions on Thanksgiving, Cole Kmet had 11 targets, 8 receptions, and 65 yards. Cole Kmet has been seeing a lot of targets as of recently. He was a guy that I talked about as a waiver wire ad before on this channel. He's a guy that has really caught fire as of recently, so I do believe you should pick him up this week up against the Arizona Cardinals. Next up, we move to the penultimate waiver wire ad, and that is Van Jefferson, wide receiver of the LA Rams, going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. With Odell Beckham Jr. and Van Jefferson having a solid showing last week, the pecking order at the wide receiver position for the Rams, to me, seems unclear. Kupp, clearly the number 1 guy. Obviously, it's not like Odell or Van Jefferson are going to fucking dethrone that guy who has been just slapping around DBs all season long. So like I said, Kupp's the obvious number 1, but between Beckham and Jefferson, it seems a little bit cloudy on who the number 2 target is on this offense week in and week out. With all of that said, up against the Packers last week, Van Jefferson had 5 receptions on 10 targets for 81 yards and a touchdown. Odell had a good game as well, so it does not seem like a 100% lock that's going to be Van or that is going to be Odell going forward as the number 2 guy. But this week, they get the Jacksonville Jaguars. So even with all that confusion, you could toss that to the side, screw the confusion, don't even think about that, just think about the matchup and love the fact that this is a get-right game for the whole LA Rams. They have been getting mopped by these teams recently. They have been getting embarrassed, clowned, I might add. But I think here up against the Jaguars, they wiped the floor with them, so Van Jefferson is definitely worthy of an ad. And the final player to be discussing in today's video as a waiver wire ad, if I did not end up touching on a player that you want to talk about, let me know in the comments. I would love to talk to you down there. Josh Reynolds, wide receiver of the Detroit Lions, going up against the Minnesota Vikings this week. All year long, we've been trying to decipher, we've been trying to dissect who is the number 1 wide receiver in terms of fantasy on the Lions. Some weeks, it's been Khalif Raymond. We've seen flashes of Khalif Raymond. And then we've seen flashes of Amon-Ra St. Brown. But no one is really stuck. No one's really that key number 1 wide receiver. Last week, it was Josh Reynolds. And they signed Josh Reynolds very recently from the LA Rams. And you want to know who was the quarterback of the LA Rams a couple of years ago, or last year, I guess, and back then, was Jared Goff. So Josh Reynolds and Jared Goff, they've got this connection. Like hydrogen and oxygen to make water. That's right, that's a chemistry joke for you guys right there. Up against the Bears last week on Thanksgiving, 3 receptions on 5 targets for 70 yards as well as a touchdown in that game. I think that Josh Reynolds could be the number 1 wide receiver on the team. Is it the mortal lock of the fucking century? Should you bet your house that Josh Reynolds is going to be the number 1 wide receiver going forward? Of course not, but he is certainly worthy of a waiver wire ad. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, make sure to hit that like button as well as that subscribe button down below. Make sure you guys check out Yahoo Fantasy as well. I love you guys all so much. much. Hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, goodbye.